Welcome back to the Win with Dice podcast, a podcast featuring members of the Win with Dice team, and this week a special guest. Joining me is Ramon,
Hey guys.
and this week we have a guest, Shells, who is working on, or I guess the head of the team or part of the team working on New Wild West.
Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. Guys, if this is your first time listening to the Win with Dice podcast, this is a podcast all about tabletop RPGs. Calvin and I like to take a casual approach to the hobby. So on this podcast, we like to talk about the cool games that we run, the cool people we play with, and the cool, wonderful people we get to experience the hobby with. Also, sometimes we get to interview cool people like Shells. If this is your first time hearing about TTRPGs, what are you doing? Go find yourself a table and go have some fun. If you are a player at someone's table, why don't you just jump behind the GM screen and give it a whirl?
Indeed. So this week, I think we are in... We've had a few moments where we interview a bunch of Lancer creators in a row. So I think this is Lancer Month Part 3, because we've certainly got a few interviews lined up in a row. Very excited to get into talking about New Wild West, as well as some of the additions that will come with the book that you can use for your player characters, and I think a lot of really interesting stuff you can add on to the Lancer setting. But before we get into all that cool stuff, we have to get to the most important part of the show, the Win with Dice Weekly GM Tip of the Week.
Yes, the Win with Dice Weekly GM Tip of the Week, brought to you by Shells. Thanks, Shells.
All right, thanks, guys. So I find that running missions can be really hard because it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I don't want to make this too difficult. And then my players are running on empty for the next combat. They don't have any repairs. They're at 1d6 plus 4 overcharge. They have no more resources. They're depleted. One way that I have found to just like completely stop worrying about this is that I just budget an encounter, a mission, to 4 times encounter budget. Before the players go on the mission, I just write out the whole enemy alpha for. If there's branching paths, I write those out. And I make sure that it is 4 times encounter budget. So this means that if there's, say, 6 enemies per encounter, according to typical encounter budget, then I have 24 enemies. And I have found that that means 4 single budget, or 2 double budget, or single, double, single, something like that. And it just works out really well to make sure that players are always challenged, but they are never pushed so far past the breaking point. Because that's not fun for anyone.
No, of course. I mean, depends on how brutal you want to be, but yeah, you don't want the game to be overloaded in difficulty. You want it to be challenging and right up on that line. I like the idea of considering the entirety of your mission when it comes to difficulty. I know sometimes, like for me personally, I'll get in the habit of just focusing on each single individual combat. But I think, in Lancer and pretty much any other tabletop game where you're considering an entire stretch of missions or whatever it may be for your game, I think it's a good idea to consider the entirety of it, as well as the resources players may gain or lose going through that entire mission or dungeon or, space station, whatever the case may be.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I say it's not fun for anyone. It can be fun to lose a mission, but just generally, my experience has been players have more fun when they scrape by with 2 standing mechs and everyone else is destroyed than when everyone gets destroyed and they have to scramble and figure out what to do next. I have more fun, they have more fun, it works.
Yeah. It's always like the Die Hard, right, scope, where it's like, Bruce Willis gets to win in the end, but he had to go through hell for it, right? You still want the players to win at the end, but you got to make them work for it.
Exactly.
You got to take away their shoes so they
they
have more fun by the end.
Oh, God.
All right. So let's get into talking about New Wild West. Shells, do you want to just introduce the book for people who may not have heard of it? I know by the time this episode goes out, it will be available, so we'll have a link to it below for people to go check it out on, I believe it's going to be on Itch.io. I don't know if you'll have it on any other platforms as well.
Physical release on Amazon.
Ooh, nice. So yeah, definitely, just give us, the elevator pitch of the book to let people know exactly what it is.
New Wild West is I always say the rootinest, tootinest splat book this side of the galaxy. It is really a lot of things in one. It is a collection of art and stories by over, I believe, 30 contributors. including like the graphic designer who put everything together, all from the Lancer community. It was all very like in-house in the community. Besides that, it's also a campaign hook and setting hook, which takes up about another 30 pages of it, which is like a 5-scene mission to help get players into the setting. And finally, there is a whole homebrew manufacturer with like 3 talents, 9 mechs, like the normal 7 core bonus or 6 core bonuses. I'm sorry. The normal amount of core bonuses, and all of that has been very thoroughly play tested. So it's a lot of things, but it's also just like kind of a grab bag of wonderful stories and art, a great little campaign hook written by yours truly, and a series of homebrew that has been tested by my community over on my Discord server for well over a year now.
Nice. Yeah. So I guess because of the name, I guess it's a Western themed setting, with all of the Western themed mechs, right?
It's kind of that. So it's set in the far reaches of the galaxy, way past the Animite line, on the furthest reaches of what can even faintly be called civilization. And now, it's not... The mechs are all themed around cowboys, because that's our symbolism for that. But it is, as, good or bad as that may be, but it's really about, like, the fact that it is... it's not a Wild West themed area. It's an area themed around surviving in an area where there is very little going on. There was a company out here, Smartfire, about a decade ago. They had big factories everywhere, spread themselves too thin, went under, and now their factories routinely get raided by people who are just trying to survive. Fortunately, weird things tend to happen in those factories, so it's not always as simple as you would suspect. It's not exactly Wild West themed, but it is Frontier themed.
I see. Okay. My initial thoughts was kind of like StarCraft vibes, because like the Terran faction StarCraft vibes are very much like Frontier at the edge of whatever nonsense they're coming from, right? Like whatever branch of big humanity they're coming from, and they're at the small corner of the galaxy compared to everybody else, and that's kind of the vibe, right?
Yeah, exactly. The small corner of the galaxy, far from everyone else, far from the eyes of the long arm of the law or the eyes of Union. It's a place where people are scraping by in one way or another, just trying to make ends meet. What I like about that as a setting is that, like, sounds hard Scrabble, but you can also have people work together really well because it's in everybody's best interest. It's just a setting that I think has afforded me a lot of freedom as a GM to be able to make these kinds of stories where, like, I don't have to consider, well, how would the immediate 3-day later Union response be to this? But I can have the players do good things and get involved in things. It really, I think, I've been able to strike that balance of low population, but people being able to have camaraderie in the face of a hard Scrabble existence.
Yeah, I think that's been a theme in a lot of the things we've looked at, is people who are in, as a community, they're in a very difficult position where they have to keep their own world turning, basically. But they're able to come together to do that. I like how players in that situation... Actually, this is something I was wondering, because I'm thinking the players in that situation, you'd want them to be part of those communities so they feel maybe a bit more of a personal connection to it. I know this is more of a setting book, but is that how you're thinking people can come at it? Is that sort of the way you would want GMs to introduce it to their players? Or is this a sort of a thing where they might be passing through and then see a situation where they might need to or might have a desire to help as well?
Well, I definitely think that it's better for them to be invested in the planet in some way. In the campaign hook, it does suggest, a way to open, which is that the players are part of a local, not really a good word for it, maybe mercenary is the best way, but kind of like fixers, local fixers on a certain planet who have been hired for a job. to rescue a friend of theirs. And I've found that, I obviously don't want to limit player choice, but I have found that really has led to some really interesting characters. I've run this a couple times, and I even have a whole campaign that grew out of it. Every time, just very unique and interesting characters, very unique reasons that they came here, how they found each other, that kind of emergent storytelling between people of their relationship, ongoing and in the past. It's wonderful, and it is, like you said, absolutely better for the players to have investment in it.
Yeah, I really like the idea of having that personal investment in this sort of situation where everybody has to rely on each other, and if there's a problem, you're a bit more inclined to solve it. So I did want to get into some of the specifics of some of the stuff you have here, but I really wanted to talk about the creation of the book, because you had mentioned how big of a collaboration it is, and even though I was looking at the credits document here, and I'm just seeing all these names here, and I really wanted to hear about the experience of doing that, because for one, I think it would be very difficult to organize that sort of thing. But on the other hand, we talk about the Lantern community a lot here, and this book, I think, it really represents a lot of effort put in from different people in the community, different writers and artists and everything. If people haven't seen the LCP file, by the way, or I guess you'll see it in the book, because there's some really good art here. There's some really cool mech designs here that I hope they get a look at. But I'm just wondering about, honestly, the entire process of this, because I think this is the largest project we've talked about on the channel. Because you said, how many people? 30?
It's around 30. I would need to double check and count the list again. It's around 30.
Yeah, how do you organize that sort of thing? How do you keep people on, people are working on their different tasks and everything. How do you get what you need? How do you play test that sort of thing? Can you just talk about that whole process, I guess?
Yeah, so what I did is I put out basically a flyer in the Lancer community. I put it in a couple different channels. I made a thread for it in one of the forums. I had people pass it around to their friends in the Lancer community who might not be in PilotNet. PilotNet is the largest Lancer Discord, for those who don't know. And got just a plethora of responses from that. From there, I would oftentimes look for samples from people, either art samples or writing samples. And yes, this was a huge undertaking. Mm-hmm. I would, as long as there wasn't something that stuck out horribly, I'm not going to gatekeep somebody who wants to take part in this based on their writing isn't as good as, say, Joyce Carol Oates or something like that. It's still good, right? I want them to be part of it. Yeah. So after that would happen, after I would take a look at a writing sample, often, sometimes it would be lore that somebody wrote for their mechs. Sometimes it would be, I got a couple of pieces that were just short, 1 or 2 page flash fictions that people had written. I basically gave them the expected page length and the pay per page for writing. And for artists, I told them what my expected budget per piece was, and asked for typically smaller illustrations. One thing you might notice is that we don't really have many full-page illustrations. In fact, I think just the front and back cover are the only full-page illustrations. And that's by design, right? They are there to complement everything else. They fit with everything, rather than being these murals that separate sections of the book. I also commissioned mech art from people who are different mech artists. Each mech, besides 2 of them, which I'll get into, have 2 pieces of art, because these are pattern groups. So that was the idea, basically. I had what I wanted. I went out and I put out a flyer, got a ton of responses, and then I realized, I don't know how I'm going to track this. So I made a way too detailed spreadsheet of who had been paid the deposit, who had turned in their work, who had been paid the final bill, all of that. And one thing that, looking back, I maybe wish that I had done differently, but I don't know how, is that I always wanted to do profit sharing. And I wasn't sure how to do it, so I didn't bring it up at first. Wasn't sure how many responses I would get, wasn't sure if I would get enough people. didn't know how it would work. So going into it, nobody really knew about the profit sharing. About July, I want to say, we were still in testing for the Mech stuff, but I sent out basically an agreement to people who had made stuff for the book, saying, "Hey, I am interested in participating in the profit sharing as well as the pay that they had already gotten." So people are getting paid twice for this, which, as somebody who appreciates artists and writers, I'm very happy to be able to do. And that process took another spreadsheet where I had to say, all right, this person has been sent the profit sharing agreement. They have not gotten it back to me. Not everybody returned those, and I'm kind of sad about it. Hope if you're listening to this and you're from New Wild West, please return it like within a month of it going live, because I would really like to be able to profit share with you. I've contacted some of the people a couple times and just not gotten responses back, and I guess they're just not interested. But yeah, New Wild West is sharing profits to each collaborator, and that was also a huge pain to organize, but I'm really glad I did. As far as the testing goes, organizing that was its own can of worms, but in a different way, because I realized no one else would test the stuff, right? Because I was basically the lead on the project. So I ran something like, I checked this message history and the thing where I post almost exclusively game listings for testing New Wild West. And it was something like 192 messages in a year.
Oof.
Yeah, I ran a lot of games.
A lot of testing.
Yeah, and that's not counting the campaigns that I run where people are playing New Wild West stuff. I run 2 campaigns, and I play in another campaign where I'm playing a New Wild West thing. So it was a lot. For a while, I was running 3 test games a week. Just wanted to get everything like polished to a mirror shine. Not so that it's obviously not so that it's perfectly overpowered, but so that it's perfectly a little flawed. But yeah, I'm not sure 192 is the exact number. I don't think it is, because sometimes I would post in 2 messages on accident, but it's a lot of games.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of work would have to go into that sort of thing. I'm still picturing that big spreadsheet you had to be doing.
Yeah, it was huge.
But I mean, like, I don't know how you would have done something like this otherwise. And I think it's really cool how you specifically mentioned, like, you know, profit sharing with the people who contributed. I think that's one of the things that's standing out to me most with this book is just how much it is a creation of the community. And I think it would be great if all the people who were part of that, you know, shared in the profit from it. Like,
yeah,
because again, like, I really like the creativity in this community.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, like, it's funny because the kind of the narrative basis of, you know, frontier people working together has really kind of translated into the actual creation of the book. Like, you know, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is super cool. I always I mean, I always appreciate any creative endeavor where everybody can get like their fair cut, I guess, or, you know, just I think there's too many bad news about, you know, developers and you know, just creative work being, you know, underappreciated, undervalued, underpaid, and there's a lot of I think it's awesome that you know, you're trying to put this initiative through. Or so hopefully those people who didn't, if they're listening, reach back out or you know, get back in contact with Shells, because not a lot of people do that.
Yeah, I really hope so. I was very disappointed, and I want to say surprised, but not surprised when I found out that it's not actually super common in the industry to do stuff like this. Typically, people are like, from what I understand, I'm not an expert. What I understand, typically people are like, yeah, you get paid and your art's in here, and now it's mine to sell. And I don't know. I didn't think that was the way that I wanted to work with people. I'm all about paying people what they're worth, or what they think, like what we think they're worth, right? Like, I'm not going. I've had artists try to undersell me their art, and I will tell them no. I'm going to pay you more. It hasn't always worked out. Sometimes people are very solid on that lower price, but I do try to always pay people what they're worth, what their work is worth.
Yeah, Well, I mean, as the I guess the creative director of this project, I mean, would you do this again? It seems like a lot of work. So I was, you know, did you find I know all of the hardships of cracking a bunch of stuff and making sure things get on time, and playtesting 100+ games is a lot of work. But I mean, I'm assuming that you probably want to do this again, or you wouldn't.
I absolutely would. I don't know that I would do as much playtesting. I would probably do something like this with just like not minimal playtesting, but an amount that is not arduous, shall we say. And I would absolutely do the community organized writing and art again. That was actually really fun because people would send me their ideas and I could tell them, that rocks, go for it. And I just was super happy to be able to like really enable a lot of creative people. So absolutely, I would do it again. I just would not do as much testing on the mechanical aspects as I have done this time. In fact, I do have one, I'm not going to say in the works, just kind of in the pre-planning stages. I don't currently have the funds to start this project, but maybe later on down the line. But I do have one kind of in my back pocket for the next, not version of New Wild West, but the next similar thing. I've had after New Wild West started getting a little bit more hype, people started reaching out and they're like, "Hey, are you ever doing something like this again? I'd love to be involved this time." And so there was just so much excitement and so many people reaching out that like I feel not like I have to, but like energized to do it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that because you spoke about I guess it gives people an opportunity, people who might not have tried publishing something, or maybe they would have written something very small that would have been very easy to miss among the larger community, something that was just a short story or like a piece of art that people may have missed, or just a short description of something. But now that it's here sort of put together, it's able to be in the hands of other players or other people who are playing the game. It's something that people can go and look at. It's something that I would hope that people who have worked on it, they could feel proud for knowing that they have something published out there that other people can have the opportunity to play with.
Yeah, I do remember one person, I cannot remember who it was, said, "I've never been published before." And like the fact that I can give them like a chance to have their work just out there in the world in a thing that has been published and sold, like there are physical copies available. I was super happy that I was able to give that person that opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's a lot of cool stuff in this book, but I think that's probably one of the best aspects of it. So if you do this sort of thing again, definitely we're gonna have to bring you back on to talk about this project.
Oh, absolutely. It was my favorite part of the project. It was very difficult because paying people up front just does have a large financial impact. But I had been planning this for a while. I was scrimping and saving, so I had a certain budget, stayed within that budget, and it was effective. It's just like if I'm going to do one that's bigger, it means I have to save longer,
Yeah, for sure. Have you thought about doing some crowdfunding?
I would be. This is a personal thing. I would be so afraid to crowdfund and then have something go wrong and it not materialize for whatever reason. That I don't think there's anything wrong with crowdfunding. It would just make me so anxious. I would be a huge mess. I would love to be able to do it, but the problem is my anxiety would be so loud the entire time. And maybe I need to just get over that and try crowdfunding it. I'll see what the response is from people. But if that's the route that I must go, then sure. I just it's a step that I haven't taken. I thought about crowdfunding New Wild West and decided against it for that reason. It's one of those things that I'm just scared of.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I could understand being nervous, if you feel like you're relying on other people's funds to do a project. Although to be completely fair, like you have already succeeded in doing this once, so
True.
Yeah.
I think if anybody could do this thing that you just did, it's you after having just done it. So
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah,
Um,
this is a crazy endeavor, and I haven't seen. I mean, I'm looking at the mechs and stuff now, but like the writing is really good, and I think the artwork's really good, and I think a lot of players and GMs when they get their hands on this are going to fall in love a little, and I think the story of its creation is also really good. It's like a feel good moment, I guess. Like if you buy this, you feel like, wow, like so much has gone into it. You have like a real chunk of the community's work into this, and I really think that I guess the Atlanta community as a whole is very collaborative, and there's always really cool stuff going on all the time. So I don't know. It's like I think it's a good. I mean, I'm gonna buy this book, but like
you.
it's really good.
Yeah. I appreciate you saying that that the art and writing is really nice. That like as the person who helped organize all this, it makes me feel really good. Like I did a good job. Not that I did the art, obviously, but like it makes me feel happy that I selected good people for everything. You know, it's actually funny. Talking about the mechs real quick. Part of the way that this project started was originally the community thing with the writing and art and all that was kind of a separate thing in my head. But one day on a long car ride, I just had this sudden flash of creativity and wrote down literally in my notes app the base kit for 7 of the 9 frames. And they've changed somewhat, but the basic idea of none of them have changed. It was perhaps my proudest moment, in at least in a long car ride, of writing down 7 cool ideas that stayed cool to me the next week, the next year even, all in an hour and a half, 2 hours.
yeah, sometimes you never know when that inspiration is gonna strike. You just have to hope
Yeah.
you're near something you can write down on.
Mm-hmm. It was just I've never been able to capture that lightning in a bottle again, but doing that, I was like, oh, you know what? These would all be a perfect fit with that, and I kind of thought like, it would be cool if there was also mechanical stuff to go along with just the. It's not really people writing stories about something is not a full setting, right? I think that the mechs really help sell the setting. So I think that it was something where I felt that these two would help each other out, and I feel like they mesh really well, and they do help each other out. So I'm really happy that happened. I'm happy that the project shaped out the way that it did.
Speaking of the mechs, I did want to get into some of them. I didn't want to give too much away, so I was kind of just going to focus on the ones that were in the LCP file, because there is some. I'm looking at the Onion specifically, and I
Yes.
just think it's a really it's like it's basically the power of friendship, the literal friendship core, with the one of my new favorite acronyms, the what is it? The Fera Responsive Imaging Electromagnetic Nanoparticle Determiner Targeting Relay.
Yes, the friend targeting relay.
I do love a good acronym. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about, I guess, some of these. You were just speaking about how the inspiration sort of came to you. So I wanted to zero on this one specifically and then, spread out to the others. But the Onion frame is essentially making friends with your enemies, I guess is one way to describe it.
Yeah, turning stalwart enemies into part-time friends. The whole goal of the Onion is that it picks an enemy and says, hey, bud, we're on the same team right now, or at least we're not the bad guys you think we are, and the enemy believes them. Translating that into mechanics was a little bit of a nightmare, but that basic idea stayed up until, November. It had a different set of effects on on its core passive with the ability to make friends with people. I will say that the LCP on itch.io is slightly out of date, I believe, just because was bad at updating itch.io when I was rushing through making all these changes, banging them out. It's changed. A lot of the mechs have changed slightly since that version, but none in huge ways. The Onion is also cool because unlike other mechs, its lock-on and scans aren't considered hostile actions. So it's a bit of a gimmicky use for it. But if you wanted to, you could take good turns locking onto someone using Bentham Foucault and overcharging to hide. If you have, say, good cover, or you have active camo or something like that, which I think is a very funny use for it. Oh. There's a big size 2 cantina on legs.
Yeah.
It's just a funny use for it. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, the idea that it's not a hostile action actually like opens the door to a whole lot of shenanigans. Now that I think about it, I was like, that's like a lot of crazy interactions, I think, or at least like a lot more than the simple sentence of it's not a hostile action kind of alludes to, right? Like, yeah.
It was one of those things where I was like, this cannot work. I'm just gonna try it, and it was fine. Yeah.
Did you find people were just trying to, I guess, make peace when they were playtesting with this?
I found that the old version of Make Peace was its own standalone. First, it was actually a standalone save that you had to make an enemy make, and nobody ever used it because they would try force the enemy to make the save. They would make it, and then they'd be like, "Well, I'm not doing that again." Then it was a quick action to just do it to someone. And even then, people were like, this ramps up so slowly that I find it difficult to find space to do it. So what I did was kind of like make it easier to use and less powerful at the same time, so that it wasn't as strong as it was while being easier to use. I believe now it's tied to scan, but the effects are weaker. So you're still making friends. It still works in that. The flavor all still fits, but it's now tied to scan. You scan the enemy. I believe they still make a save, but it just feels a lot nicer to have an action that you already kind of want to take.
Right. Yeah, I just think it's a fun idea. There's just it wasn't until looking at this that I just thought over like how much. I mean, I guess it's typical of a TTRPG where so much of the interaction is just the hostility. We're trying to like reach out and settle things without it coming to combat is not usually an option that comes up unless it's sort of like it's not so common an option as just fire the biggest laser before the other person does. I just really like the idea of making that into mechanics. I like the idea of taking something that could be an interesting narrative idea and then putting that into a mechanic that makes it easier to work through in a game setting.
Oh yeah, I mean that's where it came from. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
That's kind of where the idea came from. The other thing about it is that it kind of works at the end of combat too. If you make one of these allies, one of these erstwhile allies, you can talk to it says, you can talk to them afterwards. Some GMs run it as you capture everyone that you shot down. Some GMs run it as you killed everyone that you shot down. But in this case, if you made friends with a guy, he will talk to you and he will give you some information if you talk to him non-violently, which I think is very useful.
Yeah, I just think that to be fair, I'm thinking about Shaka's latest release, Amount of Remorse, and the talent there, the siren.
Oh, the orator talent, yeah.
Orator talent, yeah. Sorry, yeah, and how you could just like shit talk somebody, but then like bully them into being your friend, and then invite them over for a drink at your.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, that was a similar situation where, like, because he was talking about, like, seeing that in the game that I was running, that one shot that I was running, like, just having that open channel that apparently every mech pilot has, where you can just talk to people, and just like making a mechanic out of that, where you communicate with them and it has some effect on them. Although that one is a bit more like disrupting them and impairing them, and sort of more of a negative impact than making friends.
Yeah.
I mean,
You can do a bit
like
of both, though.
like the rival, right? You're like,
Yeah.
you look pretty strong. I'm gonna beat your ass, and then you're like, come get a drink. Like,
Oh, now I want to
man, you
combine
look
these
good
two.
out there. Get a drink with us.
I know, right? Like, and I think the artwork sells it so hard. Like, I love
Thank
that.
you.
Like, even on the legs, there's like pop-out tables where you could just like hang out. It's really sweet.
Yeah, and the cutaway that the artist did on the inside, so you can see the table inside and like the light streaming in. It just fills me with joy every time I see it.
Yeah. I always think that like there should be more room on mechs. And mechs are, I guess, depending on what size that you're imagining the mech to be, but like there should be enough room for like a little like place where you could sit down, because like these are basically like they're walking tanks, right? So it's like they should have room to have like a rest, because like I think the idea that like you're going on a mission for days and you're just kind of like have to sleep outside, it's kind of weird. Like you should be able to have a place to chill inside of your mech.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, that's where the idea for the onions art came from. Because on these things, I basically like gave people like a basic idea of what it was like. I gave them the lore, I gave them the frame, and I said, go for it, for the most part. And one of the ideas that I had for the onion was like, it has enough space for people to hang out in. People just love to hang out in there, and the artists just took that and ran with it, and I was super happy about that.
Yeah, I really like, and I think this might, I guess, sort of represent the vibe of the book as a whole. Just the classic, Western saloon doors, the attire and everything, but it's also inside this large walking machine, with the exposed wiring and everything on the inside, but also like the wooden design on the inside.
Yeah. I'm also really excited for people to see the other art. So for the mechs, because all but again 2 of them have 2 pieces of art, and like they're also really good. It's just, as far as I know, you cannot put 2 pieces of art in CompCon, which is quite sad.
Oh no, you can't actually, huh? I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, there's some mechs that have galleries, but those are hard coded as far as I know. No, I could be wrong. I could be speaking mistruths, but that's what I was told like last year when I tried.
Yeah, I think that as a player, when you like on your pilot, you could have as much image. You could upload your own images, I think, that you can use, right? So you could have multiple images. So maybe you could just release this alternate. Well, I guess they could just take it from the book, actually, and just put it in there. Just be like, hey, there's the alternate artwork for it.
The one that gave me the most trouble actually was the spill.
Okay, let's. Oh yeah, the spill. That was another one that I really liked. It just looks like a whole. It looks like literally a construction yard sort of started walking around.
Yeah, it is. It is like that is the lore. That is repurposed construction material. People were building up a colony wherever it was, or something like that. Maybe tearing something down. Someone stole it, took it to a scrap shop, reworked it into this brutal thing. It went through so many iterations, and the only thing that has kept since day one, my most reworked frame, is its core power, which I think is I wanted the frame to be more similar to, and I still really love the core power.
Yeah, well, let's get into it, because I don't know if it's changed from the current LCP file, but
the core power has not changed for a single moment since that long car ride. So basically, what it does is it gives you omni resistance, and gives until the end of your next turn, and gives your allies basically hard cover against attacks, but only against enemies in line of sight of you. then we can just walk around a wall to avoid it, which is what I tend to do when somebody uses it. It's also a one-off core power that only lasts for one round, so it's not oppressive, but it does feel so good to use.
Yeah, like how is it being used in your playtesting, and how what has it sort of matched the feeling that you wanted it to have?
So it's been used a couple times. Once to like the effect that I was just talking about, where it was just perfect. I had enemies go behind walls to shoot allies when they could, but besides that, they just ate the difficulty. Shooting the spill, which has 3 armor, only 6 HP, but 3 armor. When it has omni resistance, like that's not doing anything.
Yeah.
Like it works really well. Generally, they use it for like a turn in a holdout where players need to reset. They'll use it for like maybe the last round of a control where players need to hold on to their points, can't risk anybody getting hurt or like moved out of the zone by a ram or a grapple or something, because it even gives that difficulty against those. The one time it was used to maybe not a great effect, but it was fine, is I was just running an environmental effect where all of the walls were see-through, so everything was line of sight. That was too much. That was a little bit too much. So one thing I will say is don't make all of your walls glass. If you have a spell, make sure that enemies have a place they can go to not see it if you're building a map. But yeah, that was the only issue that I've ever had with the core power. Was a really weird environmental effect that I quite liked, but just maybe not with the spell.
I mean, I have to admit, now you've got me wanting to somehow put a mech encounter in the middle of the world's largest stained glass factory.
Yeah, it was really fun. Besides that one round,
That's fair.
because enemies could shoot through the walls because they have line of sight. It's just hard cover. Players could do the same thing, and because it was even like that, people had a lot of fun with it. There's also weird things where it's like if you were in the danger zone, because you were in the danger zone, you could melt through it because it was there's a weird sit rep, but it went well. Yeah. And the spill's main thing now is that it punishes. It's a frontline defender, so most defenders are very slow. They have trouble getting to the front line to protect their allies. The spill actually is good with backline allies because he goes to the front where he defends you from afar. So if an attack would pass through the spill's spaces to like towards an ally, he can just jump in the way of it. He can say, no, you're shooting me instead. Because he's such a big, bulky guy, right? Like, how are you not going to hit him?
I was gonna say I did notice there was a lot of size 2 and 3 mechs in this one, in your setting here. Like
yeah, 1, 2. Yeah, I mean, there isn't. Flies isn't actually size 3. Flies is weird. We can talk about the flies in a sec. It's not actually size 3. It's just the best way to explain what size it really is. Yeah, I guess there are quite a few size 2s. I just think, like, they can't get down to, like, the sleek, shiny construction of, like, an SSC size 1, right? Like, it's just going to be kind of bulky and weird.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing the spill can do is that he can keep enemies near him, and by overwatching with a grapple, and adjacent enemies have difficulty attacking his allies. So the gameplay loop on him is to get in an enemy's face, and they now have to shoot you, or they can, disengage. They can move in some way that doesn't cause reactions. They still have options, but your whole game plan is to stop your enemies from shooting your friends by positioning yourself near the enemies. And I find that a really fun dynamic for a defender.
Yeah, it also feels like it kind of ties back to the main concept of having to work together to make your way through this particular, setting, this particular position you find yourself in. wanting the players to function as a team, wanting them to want to like sort of help out the community that they find themselves a part of. Having someone whose job it is to get in front of the bullet for someone else, I think just ties all the way back into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Full circle.
You did mention the flies frame.
Yes.
Which is... I couldn't decide if the flies or the flock was my favorite looking one, so let's talk about the flies.
Okay.
I think it looks very cool. And you had mentioned it's supposed to be, or in concept, it's size 3?
Kind of. So it's considered a size half frame for all things except for the actual footprint on the board. It takes up a 3x3 area of tiles. That is Blast 1 area. So it has the same footprint as a Barbarossa, but if there's a long wall that's height 1, it can take cover behind it. And the reason for this is it is just a guy in a hard suit, not dissimilar to like how an Atlas is just a hard suit, being protected by a swarm of drones. And that swarm is huge. So it is a dust cloud. It is a tornado. So enemies shoot anywhere near you, they're more than likely going to hit something. It is basically a melee assassin. It is also a melee drone frame. And the last interesting fact about it before I put together its game plan is that it has squad movement. It can move through walls as long as some of its tiles are free on either side. Because the drones just pick you up and carry you over. They find a crack and pull you through, like whatever it is. As long as there's a crack of more than size half, you can fit through. Same as flight rules with moving through objects. Which weird quirk of the flight rules that you just ignore obstructions when you move. The flies. His whole game plan is to place down a drone that is going to obstruct an enemy somehow, mess with their movement, mess with their line of sight. He has an integrated drone that does this. He has 2 drones in license that help with this. And then he gets bonus damage for attacking enemies near his drones. So really like fun loop of maybe even like set down a Tempest drone from the Hydra license next to a guy, hit him into its range, and then he gets bounced out of it for another d6 of damage. It's super fun. It's very bouncy. It's really fun with the Jaeger Kunst because you're basically size 3 and can move through walls as though you were flying. So you can just sort of zip, zap, zop all over the place. He's a funny guy.
I was gonna say it's just like if you decided not to have the Baylor just be in one piece. You're just like having everybody spread out and kind of walking around. I do like going back to the artwork is great. I love that there's like a little like you can see him like the pilot stepping on the drones and like kind of walking around on them. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like to imagine that every time he takes a step, one lands under his feet right before.
Yeah, oh, cool.
It's just a super cool frame. It also went through some heavy changes, mostly to its license. But it used to have a heavy mount and no damage trait, and then people never used the drones. So I think that the damage trait and main aux mount it was the way to go.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was actually wondering because I do see the heavy mount here. I was like,
yeah, no, it no longer has that. Sorry, should have been better about updating with all of the various updates on itch, but alas.
Well, when the book is released, then people can go see the updated LCP file. Well, I say when, but by the time people are hearing this, it will have been out. So if you want to see the updated LCP file, there's a link below to the itch.io page. Or actually, I can link to Amazon as well, since you have a physical copy of the book.
I will give you the links for both. Absolutely. You already have the itch.io link. I will give you the link for Amazon. So those are 3 of the frames that I love them all. They are all my favorite children. They're all very cool. Some of them, like the Dime, have like totally unique mechanics with its gas tank. It's a lot of fun. You may notice there's only one artillery. That's kind of by design. I think the current artillery are already so good that it's hard to find design space for another one. Not that it can't be done, but there's only. I guess there's actually two now. There's the Magdalena / the details, because the devil's in the details.
That's actually that is something I was wondering. Because I was wondering about your approach to design, because I found that sometimes it falls into two different directions, where someone will have like a mechanical idea and then try to figure out how to describe that, or they'll have like a narrative idea then try to figure out how to apply mechanics to it. So I was kind of wondering about your approach when it came to the mechs, like, like you did describe this inspiration that hit you. So was that more of the narrative around the mechs, the play of them, or did you have like mechanics ideas that you thought you could fill some gaps that maybe weren't filled by what was available?
I'm much more mechanics focused, but I think the only one that was more narrative focused was the Onion. The rest of it is definitely more mechanics focused. That is always my approach to designing mechanical stuff. I think in Lancer, if you're going to it's not wrong to design something from a narrative-focused approach, but you're going to have a lot of trouble explaining it in mechanics if you aren't willing to cut some of the narrative stuff. A lot of times what I see is people are so married to a narrative idea that is not impossible to show in mechanics, but might be too strong or way too weak, that it's really hard to do. I think for me, going mechanics focused is always the way that I work best.
And I guess that's where like playtesting would come in as well.
Mm-hmm. I am a strong believer in playtesting. I know in some, I don't play other tabletop games. I've played exactly one session of any other tabletop game, and that was like 4 years ago. But I've heard that a lot of other games don't consider playtesting homebrew to be totally necessary, because you'll see if it's okay when you use it. And I just think that's such a weird and wrong-headed way to go. Not that people are they're objectively wrong for doing this, but it's just, I don't really understand, if you're going to make something, why not make sure that it's the best it can possibly be before releasing it to a wider audience? That's kind of the way that I approach these things. And that's why New Wild West was originally supposed to come out in September. I had some health issues and then noticed some things. I wanted to rebalance some stuff, so it took longer than was expected. This is my approach. Mechanics first. I don't really understand not testing, stuff like that.
Is that maybe more for a home game sort of thing? I can't imagine publishing something and not testing it.
Yeah, so home games, that's whatever. I really like, hopefully there's nothing wrong with him. I don't really keep up with YouTube drama or whatever. I really like XP to level 3's stuff where he goes through various homebrew stuff. And even when he goes through the good homebrew on D&D Beyond, apparently a lot of it isn't heavily tested. And I don't know how, I guess I just don't know why you would proliferate something through a website for just random people to use if you don't know that it's good, if you haven't tested it. But also, I guess D&D is a different kind of game where narrative and mechanics flow into each other much more. So that might be part of the split there. But for me, somebody who is exclusively focused on Lancer, I just don't understand not testing.
Mm-hmm. Well, Lancer inherently is crunchy mech combat and vibes, right? That's basically the game.
Yeah.
So if you're only focusing on the vibes, the crunchy mech combat's not going to work out, and if you're just only focusing on the crunchy mech combat, then the vibes won't work out. So it's you gotta marry the two, right?
Yeah. And I was doing all that playtesting. I got not tired of it, but I longed so much for my campaigns, because one of them, it just scheduling issues didn't work out for a couple months. The other one had to be canceled due to scheduling issues, and I just longed for my for my campaigns, my narrative, my beautiful narrative.
Yeah, scheduling issues are, of course, the most difficult enemy to conquer when it comes to tabletop games.
Yes. Like, I'm unexpectedly out of town today, recording this, and I was supposed to have a Lancer game today for the first time in like a month and a half, and got called away last minute. Had to go to something, and everyone was fine with it, but I just missed my beautiful narrative.
Fair. Hopefully, getting to talk about Lancer will partially make up for it.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I did want to talk about a couple of the other things with the book. The talent fine-tuned, I think, had some interesting flavor to it. And it was, again, the thing that's sort of like adding like mechanics to a cool narrative idea. We did cover a lot of the mechs. I think maybe if you just want to talk about that briefly, and then any other details you want to get into for the book before we finish things off here. As far as talents go, it's pretty straightforward, I guess. It more has to do with like your repairs and everything. I just like the vibes of it. I'm not sure how different it is in the published version.
I believe that this is the same. Oh, I don't actually. Your version, I'm not entirely sure. I can tell you what my version is, but I don't know if you want me to just like list off some mechanical stuff for a minute.
I mean, we do talk about mechanical stuff a whole lot here.
Okay.
So yeah, let's get into that.
All right. So tune up. When you stabilize, you can apply any options you would take for yourself to an adjacent ally. So when you stabilize, you can have them mark a repair to fill their HP, or have them clear their burn, stuff like that. Very powerful effect. Super strong with House Guard 1, reminiscent of House Guard 1, and the fact that like takes these things that are so limited in some way and opens them up. Chop Shop. This is the one that is for everyone, because I think talent should have some stuff for everyone. When you stabilize, you gain +1 speed and +1 armor to a maximum of 4 armor until you take a hostile action. This effect cannot stack with itself. So a little bit more reason to take that. I've seen some people do some heinous things with this by reverse OC looping. This is not the most effective strategy in the world, but it did make them tankier and a little faster. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then refurbish. At your discretion, you may share your repairs with allies during a rest. And when you stabilize, you may additionally mark 1 repair to heal once per scene. When you stabilize, you may heal an adjacent ally to full HP without marking a repair. So it is like a once per scene heal, and between scenes, you can share your repairs. Now, some people do think that steps on Lancaster a little, because Lancaster can share its repairs. But I actually once got into a situation with the GM when I was playing. The Lancaster trait only says adjacent allies, and they said that you don't count as adjacent if you're not on a tactical battle map. So we could not share during rest, which, like, I don't know.
Huh. That's kind of weird.
Yeah. And we checked the rules errata and did not see a word of Tom, at least not at the time, about this. So we just had to go with what the GM said as what their reading of it was. And so I was like, you know what? This way, even if that is how it's supposed to be, now you can share repairs during your rest. Good job.
I love that you're like, don't worry, I'll fix this problem.
Yeah.
I mean, I would think if you're standing next to each other, but fair.
Yeah.
I'm sure that in some narrative situations where it's like, well, you guys are resting, so theoretically you guys are just chilling, and like when you're chilling, you could be next to somebody, or you're like playing the battle bus, right? Like you're probably carrying everyone's shit anyway if you're a Lancaster, right? Like
Yeah, but there's also the thing about how like you can't stabilize during rests in order to charge up your solid core on the Sherman, right? So
Right.
tactical stuff doesn't exist in the narrative layer. So, I couldn't really fault the GM. I was like, you know what? That's very fair.
Yeah,
I
If
guess,
you look at it from the
yeah.
perspective of like certain things work in combat, then yeah, I get that. I guess just the specifics of adjacency outside of combat is a bit of a yeah. It seems like it should work, but I guess that makes sense. But it also seems like a very niche corner case rules thing.
That's how
Yeah.
I felt.
Interesting. I never thought about the solid core not being able to charge up. I guess I never thought my players very rarely use the Sherman at all. So, interesting.
Yeah, Sherman is cool, but I've had a lot of players really like it for 2 missions and then get so bored on the third.
Yeah, because it only really does like one thing, and then once you figure out how to make that thing happen, it's like kind of you just do it, right? You're like, okay, charge up the cannon, shoot everything else, charge up the cannon, fire the cannon, everyone's dead. Okay, cool. Like,
yeah, absolutely. That is, and I alluded to the fact that there's very little artillery, and both of them are very weird. It's because I guess it's getting a little into general Lancer talk, and we can veer back towards New Wild West. I think that's a problem with a lot of artillery. Sherman is like artillery striker based on its weapons, having longer range than 10. Besides the soul pattern laser rifle. But this is one of those things where it's like, in a large way, sometimes the best way to play as an artillery is just to get the mod lets you shoot through walls and hang out behind a wall and just kill one person around and then check out for the rest of the turn. Or one person a turn and then check out for the rest of the round, right? Like,
yeah.
So the artillery that I made can't really do that.
Yeah, true. I think that's more or less the I call it like the football scenario where everybody just lines up and then rush at each other, right? You know, you'd have to like have some sort of like, aha, this dude stuck around and now you're in melee. Like, what are you gonna do, artillery man? Like,
yeah,
to kind of make those dudes' lives a little bit harder. But yeah. Other than that, it would be pretty kind of just like, well, I'm like, you know, whatever, like 15 spaces away. My team has already checked their artillery, so I guess I'm just chilling and blowing dudes with knives like 50 down range. Like, who cares if that dude has a really sick sword? He's dead.
Yeah,
like...
exactly. Yeah, I had one mission where I was trying to dive the artillery the whole time. Like, I had specters, I had cataphracts, and the Monarch made it through, taking like, I don't know, like 5 HP of damage. We had 2 mechs destroyed for the rest of the team. 2 of them were fully destroyed. Monarch did not care. He was chilling.
Yeah, he's like, there's a lot of dudes on the map. There, here you go. Press the button.
Yeah. Press the button
Maybe
to kill the one dude who can threaten. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you tried missiles? Like, I don't know.
Press the button to kill the one dude who can threaten me. Oh, there's another one. Press the overcharge button and do it again.
I feel like you would have to like have like a bunch of witches. Like, I always do this. I threaten my players all the time to be like, what have you thought about like a bunch of witch grunts? Just like 20 of them. Just show up and then just make your mech explode.
No, what you gotta do is have a veteran hacker witch with Legion and ultra veteran witch with Legion and hacker, so that its teardowns do 11 heat and have 2 accuracy.
That sounds horrific. Especially because, again, I feel like a lot of my players, I mean, including myself, like as a player, I'm like, I never think about the, you know, not stabbing dudes. I'm always like, I need to stab a dude, right? That's what my mech is focused on. And then it's like, I'm still like, you know, I'm running my mech off of like a microwave computer, right? It's just like, oh, I'm so gonna explode right now because, you know, I have taking 11 heat sounds horrific. And I'm just kind of going through the mind of like what my heat cap is for most of the mechs I've ever designed, and it would just die immediately.
Yeah,
like
yeah. That is nearly 3 stress to an Atlas. Like, come on now.
Take that, you weeb. Like,
yeah.
Why is it everyone we talk to gives Ramon some horrendous idea to run a game with?
Hey, look, I have run some horrible things. My favorite, again, this is general answer talk. My favorite encounter type, though, is the 4 Ultra encounter, where you just run the players into 4 Ultras, and that's it. No other enemies.
Oh no.
It sounds terrifying. I've never had the players lose. I've never even had someone get destroyed in one of those fights. Because it turns out that's just 8 activations. If you're running against 4 players, it's just a double activation encounter. Just fewer bodies on the board. So it's actually kind of less mental overhead for everyone. Players get super scared at first. They're like, what the fuck did you do, GM? Why are you doing this to us? What did we do to deserve this? Then it's a great time for everyone.
Yeah. You know what it is? Actually, Trey brought us up the last time we spoke to him in the last episode, where I think it's just like the stress rules, because they're being applied to the enemies. Like, you could get really lucky and just one shot one of the ultras, right? Like, it's not out of the ordinary for a lucky set of rolls to just completely undermine one of those big bads, and all of a sudden the stress is like a lot less.
Actually, this brings up my favorite house rule. This house rule that I have has made my games so much more fun. So, you know how 1 stress enemies, when they get overheated, they remain at their heat cap and just get exposed? Like, they don't immediately melt down?
Yeah.
That's what I do for all enemies. All enemies have that same reactor where when they would get stressed, they just immediately get exposed, and they stay at their heat cap. And now that sounds like a nerf, because you can't stress an enemy out. But realistically, the average heat cap is 8. That is 5 hacks to stress. That is 2 rounds if you overcharge on one of them. And there's only 6 rounds. You're not getting through that 8 heat cap. So what this does is, oftentimes when you do get it, it's an ultra, right? So they roll twice. They're going to get impaired instead of exposed. They don't care, because ultras don't care about impaired. Right. So what this does is actually makes them. It buffs heat gen builds, or like heat gun builds. But like in a really fun way. The only thing that it nerfs is the Banish Osiris combo, which can do 24 heat in a single turn, and kill half. Yeah.
But they're exposed anyway, right? So like they're gonna get jacked up.
But they can stabilize, right? They have options, but your team can capitalize on it if they already went, if they're not going again, just by shooting them, right? It's been really fun. It's my favorite house rule that I've ever come up with.
Interesting, because then because you're helping still, because you're limiting their action economy, even though they get 2 activations, right? Which is like the big deal. It's like that's the scary part. It's like they get the 2 activations, and I don't know, maybe if you chose like the big fuck you cannon that all ultras get to choose, which I think every ultra should just have the big fuck you cannon. Like no matter what kind of mech it is.
My favorite ultra that I ever ran was an ultra support, but it had no support features. Instead, it had the Hellfire cannon and cluster munitions, or Hellfire, whatever Hellfire projector and cluster munitions. So players got hit by it for something like 15 energy plus 6 burn, and started sobbing. They were like, "GM, you can't do that to us." And I was like, "You should have scanned it." Just go one handily.
Why didn't you scan, bro? Like, that's so funny.
I even said, this is normal. It has no support optionals. I told them that, and they were like, "We'll find out what it does."
I love it.
They found out.
Yeah.
Walked around and found out.
Can't do that, GM. But I did, though.
Yeah. Turns out I can, in fact, do that.
Yeah, get good, kids. Like,
yeah. No, I'm a mean.
Sure, they won anyway. Like whatever.
Yeah, they did. Like handily.
Yeah.
In that same sit rep, I had a Blackbeard player melee a Demolisher to death.
Ooh.
Demolishers have resistance to all melee hits. He was just going for it. He had Sekhmet up, so he didn't really have a choice, but he just went for it, and it worked out somehow, like 100 to 0. Like this Demolisher was dead in a single turn because he just kept critting with his heavy. It was a bit insane.
Nice. I mean, that's just Blackbeard. I do appreciate that, the way that they like Tom and Miguel laid out the book, where it's like the first mech you see is like this crazy roided up like demon mech that's just like ready to rip and tear anybody to shreds, and also is Spider-Man.
Yeah. And then the second one is a green army man plastic figure.
Yeah. And he's like, now I am House. Like, this is my power.
Dr. House MD.
Yeah. It's good. I much appreciated. I guess that's, again, I like you said, you're only playing Lancer right now, or like has pretty much your TTRPG I guess experience has really been a lot primarily Lancer, right? This game's fun.
Yeah, it is. I do not get tired of it, which is weird because normally that's not me. Like, I get too into a thing, I'll hyperfixate on it for a little bit, and then I get off it. Lancer really stuck around for me. It's just that good.
Yeah, I think it helps just how adaptable everything is in the game when it comes to making player mechs, when it comes to making NPCs, even making combat situations. Just how modular everything feels. I think that really helps the longevity of the game, at least like from my perspective. Okay, I did want to get into some other stuff with the book, but I just realized how long we were recording.
I'm so sorry.
Oh no, not at all. Like, one of the things I really like about having people on is just getting into long conversations about like things they're working on and all their ideas and stuff, because it's always fun hearing what's going through other people's heads when they're working on like a book, or even when they're just working on like running encounters and stuff. However, I do have to consider future Calvin who has to edit this, but
okay.
I did want to real quick ask if there was anything else you wanted to mention about New Wild West before we headed into the outro of the episode.
I mean, only real thing is that it, like, I guess there's one funny story I can tell, which is just that I got kind of depressed, so I added 2 mechs at the very end because I needed something to work on. I was like, I need to do something with my hands, and I took 2 old mechs that I already designed and like didn't really like, and just completely reworked them from scratch to fit into New Wild West in like a day and a half, which I thought was fun. Really fixed my mood. But besides that, New Wild West available Amazon and itch.io. But before this podcast comes out, it is $15 on itch and $35 on Amazon, because Amazon does take a pretty big cut. The royalties aren't huge there. I make about the same amount from each. I say really it's we. It's going into the business account that I set up for this so that I can pay out to everyone from there. That's all I've really got for it. I'll give you the links for those after the recording. And thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and they will be linked below. The release date is March 4th, I believe. So yeah, by the time people are listening to this, by the time you're hearing this, it will already have been out. So you should have picked it up already. Yeah.
Why didn't you? Clock is ticking.
All right. Shells, thanks so much for coming by. Had a whole lot of fun talking about this, and I'm really looking forward to the release of this book, because I want to see what everyone has contributed to it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated this.
And everybody else out there, thanks for coming by and listening to this episode. Again, the book will be linked below, so go check that out. If you want to hear more Lancer stuff, be sure to check out the podcast playlist, because there's a whole bunch of Lancer-related episodes in there, and there will be some more coming in the near future. Also, if you're into the Pathfinder RPG, we've covered that quite a lot. Starfinder, Mutants and Masterminds, all sorts of stuff. We've talked about it here on the channel. So if you're into tabletop RPGs in general, please feel free to check out the podcast playlist. In addition, if you want to see more Lancer stuff, we have links below to projects from everyone we've talked to on the channel. We've got some of their stuff linked below. So go check out the rest of those links. In addition, links below, we have the Untold Stories project channel, where I'm at on Wednesdays going for the future, where soon we'll be returning the Freedom League Dark series, which is our magic-y superheroes thing. More of a multiverse hopping thing, really. In addition, they also have a series on Tuesdays, Something in the Dark, which is more of a street level magic-based story. So definitely go check out their stuff. I love hanging out with that group, so I want to make sure to shout them out whenever I can. And also on the channel, if you want to see some live gaming streams, if that's more your thing. Currently, I'm playing through Control, Baldur's Gate 3, and Mass Effect Andromeda. So if any of those sound interesting, or any of the previous series, check out the live stream playlists. But that's all I've got for now. Anything either of you want to mention before we end this episode?
I'm happy. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, it was great having you on, and yeah, we should have you on in the future.
I would love that. Thank you so much.
If you do start that new project, we will definitely have you on the show.
Okay.
All right. Well, for all of our GMs and players out there, just remember to keep on winning with dice, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.